See, I made sure to put it in the title. I'm going to stay calm, cool, collected during this entire recap because y'all know today's show, Thursday, August 20th, was heavy on Ted. But that's okay though, because yes, Ted was cheating going on, but you know what? I'm actually going to be very sympathetic to Ted's plight on today's episode. So thank you for joining me. Y'all know I like to have fun. Let's jump to it. This, of course, is for Thursday, episode 151. Let's go ahead and talk about it. I don't know about y'all and what you thought about the episode, but I actually love the way they actually put this whole episode together. I felt like it was smooth. The cinematography was excellent. I love the way we saw 4 different perspectives on the same story, the same origin story of Ted and Leslie. We had Kyle and Nicole. Nicole was just sharing various things, not getting so heavy into Ted and Leslie, but just how the whole cheatation and liation and things like that affected her. Then, of course, we have it from Leslie's perspective. And because Leslie puts 20 on 10, right, we know that Leslie is zhuzhing up things in her mind. Then we have Ted and Bill. When Ted went to go visit Bill, big bad bedridden Bill Hamilton, as he called himself, right? They are talking, and we get the flashbacks from Ted's perspective. And then we have Eva and Isaiah. Eva is filling Isaiah in on exactly why her mom is so crazy over Ted. So let's go ahead and start with Leslie. So they pick us up where they left us off on 150, right? We see Leslie and my ex-husband, Marcel, in her hotel room. And she is so on cloud 9, y'all, because people were happy about her serenading him at Orphy Jean's earlier, right? And so she's like, what can I get my boo thang to drink? And he's like, woman, you got to be crazy. And she's like, what are you talking about? Why are you so grumpy in essence? And he's like, I know what you're doing. You, me, this, not gonna work. And then she asked him again, who put a bug up the back of your butt, basically? And y'all, Marcel says, you mean to tell me you rather slump it out here at the Bowman, basically, than join me for sticky, continuous lovemaking on my boat? And she's like, basically, enough. I don't want to be your bunkmate on your boat. And y'all, Marcel cannot understand this. And so she even tells him when he starts saying things like, wait a minute, weren't you basically the one that said that we are not like all these uppity, too good to do, do folks? We're not like them. Y'all, Leslie gets upset and she says, Marcel, enough of your lip. And she gets up in his face. I am the Leslie Thomas. And she says to him, in essence, she's not going to apologize for not only wanting good things and a good life, but going after it. And basically, your shift is over. Bye. Get out. How come, y'all, when Marcel just simply, without a word, all silence, turns around and gets ready to walk out, Leslie's like, wait, what? And he just goes. Isn't that how we are, ladies? Any of you guys ever done that? Maybe not tell him to get out, but, listen, we've all had instances, those of you who have a man, we all have instances where we're just being emotional. We don't really mean the stuff we're saying. And this is why it's so important to guard our tongues when we do get upset with our men, because we will say something. I'll never forget this. A preacher told me this. It had to be like 20 years ago. It can take 3 minutes to tear down something that took you 3 years to build, meaning it can happen so quick. And guess what? It's very difficult to come back from very hurtful words, because even though the person will forgive you, even though whatever, the words will actually never be forgotten. And so she didn't really mean that, but because Marcel don't care no way, right? He just moseys right on out. But then we see Marcel, right, y'all, going over up to Uptown, up at the bar. And here we go with Grayson, y'all. I don't like this role that Grayson is playing where he's now, the counselor to everybody. He's listening to everyone's problems, whether they are Dupree adjacent or not. And so this is the purpose he is now serving on our show, I suppose. So he sits there with Marcel, and Marcel is sitting there, and Marcel's like, give me a double. And he's like, oh, it's been that kind of day or night. And Marcel's like, yes. And so he asks him, what's the problem? He's like, what it always is, a woman. Well, we later go back to the hotel where we see Leslie, y'all, angry that Marcel walked out. Damn it, she says. And then y'all know they always give us these scenes with Leslie looking at herself in a mirror. And she's either going to be, her psychosis has either been triggered or she's about to have a flashback. So she's looking at herself and her eyes are welled up with tears, y'all. And she starts thinking about how she met Ted. And not only that, she's also thinking about some of the things that Eva has tried to tell her about letting go of this hope that you and Dad are ever going to be together. She even remembers what Eva told her in Orphegenes. Are you willing to let go of basically a man who actually wants you, aka Marcel, for a man who's done told you it's never going to happen? You know what is so fascinating to me, y'all? The fact that Leslie seems to totally have forgotten about the conversation that Ted had with her in his office from our vantage point just a few episodes ago, where he sat her down. He tried to talk to her like she had sense, right, y'all? And he said, I don't want to hurt you no more than I already have. But Leslie, it's never going to happen. It shouldn't have even happened. He even told her, I never loved you. You were just you just were somebody I was using to soothe my hurt feelings and the neglect of my wife, but I never was going to be with you. And that didn't do nothing, y'all. I'm like, you know what? So she starts thinking about, and so we see this flashback. We see, I said that I was going to be calm, right? I said I wasn't going to go off. And so guess what? I'm going to stick to that. So we see Ted. And I like the way they tried to make Keith look younger by putting on, because when it comes to Keith D. Robinson, the type of clothing that makes him look really good are solid colors. Busy fabrics do make him look younger. And so I like the fact that they put him in each scene except the bedroom scene. And that was only because he was coming from an event, Dupree event. He had on those busy fabrics because it did, it doesn't, he looks different. And so we see him plopping himself down, child, as my grandmama would say, up at the bar where Leslie worked. And she's calling him whipped cream, right, y'all? Because she tells him, I'm the waitress. I work down the street at the cafe on Phoenix Street. And you are whipped cream. That's her nickname for him. And she tells him that, she came up with that because he always orders whipped cream on his pancakes. And I'm like, you know what? Get Ted. Y'all get Ted out my face. Get Ted out my face. And we see throughout the episode, just the origin and the transition and the growth of their relationship. They eventually go for drinks where she does try it. She puts her hand on his and he's like, I can't. He's complaining to her about his wife. I want to tell y'all something. This is for all my young listeners. Like if you're a young woman and you are like 18 to, I'm going to say 30, I want to share something with you that one of my mentors told me when I was your age, when I was like early 20s, maybe 21. She told me, anytime a man who is married starts talking to you about the problems he has with his wife, that's a man who's looking for a salve, she called it, an S-A-L-V-E, a salve. Because a married man should be talking to another married man about his problems with his wife. And it always starts out innocently because everybody needs someone to talk to. But when he knows that you're single and he's married and he is just like, it seems like he's just complaining. And what happens, just like what happened with Leslie, you just start offering up advice. You become a listening ear. He knows what he's doing. You may not know what he's doing. And so I was always encouraged to never, ever enter into those kind of conversations. And you have to come up with what to say. One of the things that I used to say when I was your age is I would say, I used to have that when I was younger, on a job or something. And a man would start in, I would say, you know what? I don't mean to be rude, but I'm not comfortable hearing about your wife unless she's here, right? And I can promise you that will shut it down like nothing else. I like to also tell young women, when it comes to anything, you need to have what I call a bag of emotional tools, like a toolbox that men and women have, right? Or your dad's fishing tackle box. He can open that tackle box and he's got all the things, every type of anything that he will need for any type of fish, right? You got to have an emotional toolbox. You got to have certain phrases, certain words in your emotional toolbox that you can pull out and use, and you know they are effective. See, I learned after talking with her that was effective. Matter of fact, if I remember right, because it's been so long ago, she told me to say that. Just say, I'm not comfortable. And you can say it with a smile. You don't have to be rude. You don't have to be like a police officer. You don't have to do all that sass, just with a smile. And I can promise you that's the end of it. Now, if you say that, but then you listen again the next time, let's say he's one of those men, he's really persistent, he means to have somebody he can jack off with because it's all you're going to be, then you know what? You'll find yourself. Even if you say, you see, this is just how human beings are. So you have to say, you know what? I got to have boundaries. So anyway, I think the downfall for Leslie, y'all, is because we learned through Eva, when Eva was talking to Isaiah, Leslie didn't even have friends as a kid. Now, you know that's messed up. She didn't even have friends as a kid. And so she always felt like the odd one out, right? And we know it's because of her behavior. And she didn't have really friends as an adult, right? And so Ted was all she had, so she was willing to listen. And not only that, we know from Peaches that she had already, slept with Peaches' man, so it wasn't no thing for her to sleep with someone else's man. But that's where she messed up listening to Ted. Ted hadn't been going over there talking either. But anywho, so we just see throughout the episode, that, like I said, the progression of their affair, where, okay, he didn't let her put his hand on his, and then all of a sudden now, he's showing up at the bar, talking about all his problems, how his wife is having all these miscarriages, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then eventually, after a bad experience where they're all over to Vernon M's house, this is a flashback we get when he and Bill are talking. And he goes out into the foyer and he calls Leslie and he says to her, I got to get out of here. I'm about to explode, basically. They don't work my last nerve. Where are you? I'll come immediately. And Bill overhears this. And he's like, Ted, and he tries to talk Ted off the ledge. And Ted basically says, you want to talk basically with your cheating behind. And, so anyway. So as Leslie is thinking about all these things, we see Ted giving her a gift, a teddy bear. And I'm going to keep going. And so then we see her, crying and all this. And then she gets an idea. She calls down to room service and she asks for something. The next thing we know, child, here comes Leslie knocking on Ted's hotel door with 2 glasses and a bottle of champagne. Again, didn't he just tell her a few days ago, it's never going to happen, Leslie. I'm in love with you. It's never going to happen. And so he doesn't answer because he ain't there. And so she leaves all this at his door and she's hoping, I suppose, he sees it. And so we later see her going to Uptown, right up at the bar, where Grayson is now her therapist. And so they talk and she tells him how she used to be a bartender. And she tells him about this drink that she created because she was so good, and it was called Black Magic. And he makes one. She gets a little tipsy. She calls Eva, right, for Eva to come pick her up. But we also believe that she calls several other folks. So we see people looking at their phones. We see Ted looking at his phone like, okay, so there was some message there. And then we see Eva looking at her phone like, okay, what? And so we suppose that she called Ted to child before she could get a hold of Eva to ask to come pick her up because she shouldn't be drinking. My thing is, why didn't Leslie call a ride share? Why didn't Leslie call an Uber or Lyft? Leslie is rich after all. At least that's what she keeps saying. The last thing we see is her with this teddy bear. So I'm like, okay, did Leslie keep this teddy bear all these years, these 30 odd years, right? Anyway, we see her on Eva's couch, with the blanket, with the teddy bear, crying, thinking about Ted. Now let's go to Ted and Bill. So how this kicks off is that, y'all know Bill's up in the hospital angry. Y'all know good. I'm like, Bill know good and well he was wrong for reporting Shanice and Ashley to Monica. They were just doing their jobs, and Bill know doggone well that's what they were doing, right? So he is ticked off. He's sitting up in bed all hot, right? So Ted comes in. Can I come in? I heard Haley was, I heard folks was booted out of here, basically. And you know what Bill says? You know what? I'm not in the mood, Ted. Basically, I know what you're coming in here for, so just go ahead and turn around and get out of here. And Ted's looking all crazy, and he's like, no, 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 man, I came in here to check on you. We go back a long time. So this is when they go down memory lane. Ted asks permission. Can he have a seat? Can he sit down? And Bill and Ted start going through everything. And they talk about how, other than their friendship and knowing each other for so many years, they also have in common that they are the only men who really understand what it's like to be married to a Dupree. And that's true, y'all, because yes, we know Jacob is married to Naomi, but Naomi's second generation or third generation. Danny and Nicole are second generation. And so they got the brunt of it. He and Bill did, being married to the girls, right? So they just talked through those things. And then Bill says to him, I understand you were just having fun, but why, Leslie, when you had a wife like Nicole? And y'all, Ted goes down memory lane. He starts remembering all these things, but he does own up to the fact. Let's give Ted credit. You see what I did there? You see what I did there? Ted talks about how he knows he shouldn't have been divulging his marital problems to her, and that, his mistake was that kiss, because we see them kissing. And he was like, but he shouldn't have been talking to her. And so he was like, you tried to warn me. And Bill was like, yep, you should have listened to me. And so that's when we see the flashback of what I was saying earlier. And of course, you've seen the show, right, by now, that, you know what? The fact of the matter is, Ted was going to sleep with Leslie either way. Even if he would have listened to Bill that one time, and he would have stayed at the house and listened to Vernon's long speech that Bill was telling him, he still would have eventually slept with her because he had already laid the groundwork. See, I have a problem when people try to claim that affairs of any kind, whether they're emotional affairs or physical affairs, that they are mistakes. They're not mistakes. They're bad decisions. Before we have sex with anybody, even our man, your husband, your boyfriend or whatever, it starts in the mental first. And so all along the way, just like Bill told Ted, there were moments and opportunities to turn around. But very often I don't think in our country, or I should say rather in our culture, in mainstream culture, because there of course are side cultures where we talk about these things. But I think in our mainstream culture in the U.S., we don't really understand that thoughts are very dangerous because all actions spring from a thought. We focus on how bad actions are, and they are bad, but they started. We got to get to the root of an action. What's the root of an action? It's a thought pattern. It's a thought process. And so that's why it's dangerous to sit around, to lay around and think about somebody in a sexual way that you're not either with or who's married, because eventually it will lead to an action, because that's the root of the action. So I like that they wrote in responsible speech, emotionally intelligent dialogue for these two men. I like that. So anyway, so then let's go to Eva and Isaiah. They're at home on the couch, and y'all, Eva, you know what? I'm tired of Eva, y'all. I'm tired of Eva hoping her mama's, I'm like, girl, okay. Because see, for all of you who are new to Beyond the Gates, we've been listening to this for close to 2 years. Okay, the same thing from this girl. And yes, we all understand that as a child, even though she's an adult, she's still her mama's child. She wants her mom to be better. But y'all, Leslie ain't done nothing to show that she is consistently going to change. And so, as I was saying the other day, it's fruitless, And so she's telling Isaiah her mom and dad's origin story. And basically she's coming up again just from what Leslie told her. And she's saying, I wish mama would just let it go, and get out of her own way like I did. But I was thinking, if it wasn't for Isaiah, Eva wouldn't have gotten out of her own way. And how did he get her out of her own way? By basically, tugging and pulling, like you pull weeds when you're trying to garden and pull up the weeds. It was very difficult. I mean, we saw it firsthand, this man trying to get this girl to let him in, right? And so she's saying to him that Leslie told Eva that she thought it was destiny, her and Ted meeting, or she and Ted meeting, and that basically, in essence, they were supposed to be together. And it's like, OMG. And so we see her going through the motions, or I should say the flashbacks. But she explains to him that her mom never felt seen. You know what, y'all, for the life of me, because we never did get much from Peaches in terms of what Leslie's childhood was really like. I mean, we do know that they didn't get along. I mean, we learned things like that. But why is it that we learned today that Leslie hardly had any friends as a child? What kind of child was Leslie? Or shall we say, what kind of mama was Peaches? It's like, how is it that Leslie turned out so terrible? And we know that it wasn't because she felt rejected, because up until her being a grown woman in season 1, she didn't even know Peaches wasn't her real mama. She learned from Peaches that Barbara, supposedly from the Articulets, was her mom. And so it's just crazy how Leslie, it seems from even very young, has had the same problem she's having now as a fully grown woman with a grown daughter. She can't get along with anybody. She's still, like Eva told her yesterday or the day before yesterday, chasing after men who are unavailable and who really don't want her. So anyway, Isaiah then starts talking about how this is very similar to what he went through with Joey. And we learned that he went over to Joey's to talk to him because he learned that his friend Des, that he used to, snatch whips with and run the streets with, he got denied parole. And so it's heavy on his mind, and so he went to talk to Joey about things. Although I will say, writers, it would have been nice if in his dialogue with Joey, he would have mentioned Des. He didn't say nothing about his friends. He didn't say anything about his friend being denied parole. So that's why, for me and my viewer experience, that scene with he and Joey didn't fit. It didn't make sense. And I was saying, even to my audience, what was the point of that conversation? And now we learn now. So this is why I say to you guys sometimes, I wonder if they couldn't have misedited this episode, because he's talking to her about Leslie. But I just felt like if that piece had been with the dialogue, it would have made sense for me as a part of the audience why he was even back over there going down the same memory lane, right? Y'all, he talks to Eva and explains, as he said to her many times before, if it weren't for Joey, he wouldn't be alive. He really wouldn't. Well, let's go to Nicole and Kyle. I loved today's scene with Nicole and Kyle. Daphne du Plessis is a great actress. And the gentleman who's playing Kyle, he all right. No, I understand that he's won many awards. He's like that other guy, who plays Grayson. He's won awards and whatnot. And but right now, I haven't gotten an opportunity to see him shine, so to speak, because he's either in the bed with her or he's with his tablet getting ready to go somewhere. So I hadn't really got to see a lot from there. But I will say that this was such a good scene today, because this is one of the rare times. Is that the same as saying it's never happened? Absolutely not. Rare means it just hadn't happened enough. This is one of the rare times where, as a viewer, I get to see Nicole actually processing her feelings about being divorced from the life she had for over 30 years. Have any of you guys ever been divorced? And so it's like, there's no way. I mean, so I like that they're giving us this. We're getting to see this. So what happens is this. She and Kyle, of course, are in the bed. And then they go into what we learned is her living room, of course, right outside her office. But I like the way they wrote this, that when he saw Nicole was triggered, he asked her to pursue those feelings. And it's the same thing with Isaiah. When he sees that Eva is stuck on something, he talks her through it. And so this is what happened in that scene. So like I said, they were cleaning up after the party. And as Kyle was trying to dump the food in the trash from a crystal dish, he accidentally dropped it. And when it broke and went all over the floor, Nicole said, "Oh no." And he was like, "Okay." And so as they're cleaning that up, he talks and he says to her, I'm sorry. And she explains that this was a wedding present from Vernon's uncle. And basically, this was a special dish. And so he says, "You want to talk about it?" So they sit on the couch, and she begins to explain how when she and Ted got divorced, she did, throw away lots of things, but there were a few key things that she did keep, and that dish was one of them. And he is very understanding. He's like, "But why wouldn't you have kept it, And she asked him about, his wife and what went on there and what he kept versus what he didn't. And so that was very interesting. Let me look here. One of the things that Nicole does reveal is that this was her very first party, y'all, without Ted, throwing a party, rather, without Ted. And she even reveals to Kyle that she had a divorce party with, Vanessa and Dan. And he's like, "You actually had one of those?" By the way, divorce parties are actually a real thing. And I think actually it's a good thing. It's a good thing. Sometimes, folks, try to do everything they can to keep their marriage together. They go to therapy, they talk to their imam, they do this, they do that. And sometimes it truly is true that you cannot make it work. Neither person can make it work. And in those cases, I don't think people should, stay in a marriage for just because of the kids, just because of religious beliefs, because eventually somebody's going to start cheating, because we're not meant, as human beings, we cannot stay in unhappy situations for an extremely long time. It's just not. I've even seen women develop health problems trying to stay in a bad marriage for the sake of society and not wanting people to think certain things, right? So I love this, I'm telling y'all. And that's pretty much it, y'all. Let me look over everything. Oh, I wrote this down. For me, this was the very first time that I heard them actually mention the name of Andre's mom. Her name was Iris. Now, they may have mentioned it in season 1. I know they haven't mentioned it in season 2, but this was the first time I recall them mentioning. They always just referred to his parents died in the helicopter crash, but we don't even know the circumstances surrounding all that. I don't even recall them ever mentioning what Ted's brother, what his name was. But when they did the flashback of Leslie talking to Ted all those years ago, he mentioned that his sister-in-law had just had a little boy. And I was like, "Oh, that's Andre's mom." So anyway, there you have it, guys. That's a recap for 151. We'll be back tomorrow, Friday, for 152. Bye, guys.